alaikum and good morning. May I request you all to please settle down as we are about to start the event. Before we proceed, I request you all to put your phones on silent mode. Thank you. My name is Atiqa Ali, and I'll be your host for today's event. On behalf of MAP, I would like to welcome you all to our annual convention titled Timeless Leadership. Now, may I request Mr. Talib Karim, Dr. Amjad Waheed, Mr. Alexander Van Reed, and Ms. Samina Rizwan to please come on the stage and be seated. We shall now commence the 23rd MAP convention with the recitation of Holy Quran.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ar-Rahman. Allama al-Quran. Khalaqa al-insan. علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان
Jazakallah. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem. May I request Mr. Talib Karim to please deliver the welcome address. Mr. Talib Karim is the President of Management Association of Pakistan since 2021 and the member of the Executive Committee since 2009. He is also the President of the Institute of Business Management. Please give a big round of applause.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. distinguished speakers, panelists, especially those present for the inaugural session, Dr. Amjad, Waheed, Mr. Alexander Van Riet, Ms. Samina Rizwan. Mr. Andrew Bainbridge will join us in about half an hour or so. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to 23rd MAP Convention. Last night things were a bit uncertain as we face daily crisis, so we don't know what will happen the next day. So I think the topic itself, timeless leadership, is quite appropriate for the type of crisis that our leadership is going through in their organizations, or if they're running a business. Things are difficult. But I must appreciate that all of you are here. We thought that we'll start on time because the more we delay things, then it usually stretches out into late evenings. So hopefully we'll try to be on time for each slot, each panel discussion, and try to wrap it up by 5 p.m. today. The MAP convention by the Management Association in Pakistan has become the flagship event where the leaders, decision makers, and policy makers of Pakistan's corporate sector converge to discuss ideas for the future. Indeed, it takes hard work and commitment to pursue an annual event where each surpasses the expectations of the organizers, participants, and stakeholders. Since the inception of MAP in 1964, so this is our 56th year, it has remained devoted to upholding professionalism, promoting best management disciplines, and encouraging the implementation of best practices that are reflective of international standards. And I'm very grateful to our sponsors because these are difficult times, but they still managed to support us even during these difficult times. MAP is a not-for-profit organization. We are all volunteers. The 10-member management committee have their own full-time obligations. So we volunteer our services for MAP because we feel that it's an apex body of Pakistan. And I'm Mr. Tariq Karim, our past president, and Mr. Amir Abbasi, the past president, is also present, and I'm happy that they are still part of MAP. So for over 55 years, MAP has been conducting programs and in-house training for member companies to ensure that the ideas of best management principles are not only visualized, but executed to bring growth and positive results in Pakistan's corporate sector. The seminars, conferences, and training courses that MAP has been conducting facilitate streamlining individual and collective performance in organizations, developing human capital, and enhancing competitiveness by envisioning and implementing management practices. So basically, we have two major annual events. One is our MAP convention that is held during springtime, February, March. And the other one is our Corporate Excellence Award, which would be held sometimes in September, October. And that's where we honor the best performing companies listed in the stock exchange in terms of various categories that they are part of. One other thing that MAP has done is that we are part of AMO, which is a national management organization of Asian countries. And as a full member of AMO, we tend to participate in various activities with AMO, which also includes participating in their Asian Management Games, where we select companies from Pakistan, and once they are selected, then they participate within the region with other countries. So the companies that are selected are, of course, our member companies. The theme of the 23rd MAP Convention is timeless leadership. And as I had said earlier, that I think it's quite appropriate because of the various challenges that Pakistan is facing, and it's a multidimensional crisis, with the inflation, high inflation, rupee devaluation, uncertainty in terms of what's going to happen with IMF, and then to top it all off, political uncertainties. So we are facing these challenges, and how the leadership, face these challenges, and whether opportunities are created through these challenges. I think once we hear various speakers from here and abroad, I think we'll learn from them. And throughout the day, we will deliberate and discuss how leadership and good governance can bring Pakistan out of its various issues and problems. During the current scenario, when economic instability is at its highest, leadership and good governance are being tested and scrutinized at every step. The illustrious speakers and panelists at this convention will share insights and ideas to fortify the notion of leadership and how it inspires and encourages an organization. Strong and vibrant leadership is needed to steer the organization through challenging times. Leadership, therefore, does not remain a trait but a concept. The top management follows suit, and the thoughts of growth, resilience, accepting and adapting to change transcend the many areas within the organization. Such concepts will be the discussion points at this convention. So throughout the day, we'll be having panel discussions with industry leaders and experts who will deliberate on how to reimagine leadership in the workplace. They will discuss the state of the economy. We have one expert, Dr. Amjad Waheed, and I think he has a vast knowledge of where we are at and what is the future. The speakers will also reimagine the future with tech, a dimension encapsulating us at the personal and professional levels, and that I think we faced during the COVID era, that technology was adapted by many organizations, by many institutions, and that is continuing. I mean, it was not a one-time thing that we adapted the technology during that time period and then we abandoned it. I think now we are continuing with that technology know-how, and even globally, many companies are now maybe working 4 days a week and maybe 1 day work from home type of a model is being adapted. If we are to propel into the future, we must pursue leadership practices that are relevant and effective regardless of the change in the corporate and business environment. After all, this is the essence of timeless leadership. Character traits such as vision, authenticity, humbleness, empathy, decisiveness, adaptability, and morality must be ingrained in our social and corporate DNA so we may identify and appreciate timeless leadership. Towards the end, I would like to give my appreciation to our partners. As I've said, we are dependent on our partners to organize such an event. So we are thankful to Unity Foods Limited, Shan Foods, Pakistan State Oil, ATCO Laboratories, Jubilee Insurance, NBP Funds, Bank Al-Falah, Habib Metropolitan Bank, SIPCA Inc., JS Bank, Amir S. Chinoy Group, Dalda, English Biscuit Manufacturers, Oil and Gas Development Company Limited, Institute of Business Management, EFU Life, Bank Islami, Central Depository Company, Greaves and Air Conditioning Private Limited, and Al-Mizan Investment Management Limited. They have been supporting us in the past and we appreciate the support now also. I would like to thank few individuals who especially helped us in introducing us to Alexander and others. So my special thanks to Mr. Farhad Karam Ali from Funworks. Asfar Hassan, I think he'll be joining us very soon, really helped us in getting the panels together and organizing the speakers for us. Mr. Khalis Reem from RG Blue and Mr. Intisaruddin. And my personal appreciation to Mr. Ali Hassan Naqvi, Executive Director of MAP, and of course his team, the MAP Secretariat, who had been working extremely hard to get this event together. I again thank all of you for being here at this prestigious event, and I hope that you will enjoy the day as it progresses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now may I request Dr. Amjad Waheed to please give his presentation. Dr. Amjad Waheed is the Chief Executive Officer of NBP Fund Management Limited. Please give a big round of applause for Dr. Amjad Waheed.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thankful to the Management Association of Pakistan and thankful to Mr. Talib Karim for giving me the opportunity to talk about Pakistan's economy. I think for leaders it's important to understand the economic environment that they are in so they can make the right decisions. So my presentation will be two parts. First, how did we reach this stage where we are? A difficult stage that we are in. What made us reach this stage? And the second part is how to get out of it. You know, what needs to be done. So, yes, so what I have done is I've done a comparison of Pakistan with other countries, one way of sort of analyzing, you know, what we have done right or what we have done wrong. I have taken the universe as countries with a population of over 1 million and GDP of over 10 billion. Pakistan's population is 220 million and GDP of over $300 billion. So there are 149 countries that basically qualify. And so if you look at the Human Development Index, you know, to start with, Pakistan is 122 out of these 149 countries. And if you look at life expectancy, it's 66 years. Expected years of schooling, this is, I think, a very, very critical number. And it's only 9 years of schooling. So a child here today, on average, only goes to school for 9 years. And if you look at India and Bangladesh, it is 12 years. So we are ranked 145 out of 149 countries in terms of expected years of schooling. And the 4 countries that are below us are Sudan, Mali, Chad, and Niger. So this is how we stand in terms of education. And even in terms of adult literacy rate, you know, the countries below us are Yemen and Mauritania, Ethiopia, Senegal. So not the type of company that would like to keep. Again, the importance of education, one of the studies shows that for every 1 year of schooling, for the average population, the GDP goes up by about 13%. So the average year of schooling in Pakistan right now is about 5 years. So if we can increase this average year of schooling to 6 years, we can add $50 billion to Pakistan economy. And then if we can add another year, so the average year of schooling for the population becomes 7 years, that adds another $50 billion to the economy. So this is the value of education, something that we have sort of ignored. Primary school enrollment numbers, on the same page, yeah, are okay, 95%. But secondary school, there's a major drop. So after class 5, we see a substantial drop in the enrollment because A, we do not have enough secondary schools in the country, and B, the distance increases, and so it becomes difficult for poor parents to send their children to school. So in Pakistan, only 45% of children make to secondary schools versus 75% in Bangladesh and 78% in India. And again, in terms of higher education, university or degree college, only 1 in 8 Pakistanis make to the university or a high degree school. If you look at India, 1 in 3 makes it to the university or high degree. If you look at Bangladesh, 1 in 4. And in Pakistan, it's 1 out of 8. So in terms of both secondary and post-secondary education, we are way behind India and Bangladesh. The key reasons for that is that A, we have not spent enough on education, and human and physical infrastructure in total, whether you talk about education or healthcare or clean drinking water or roads or dams, we have not spent enough. And B, the governance issue, whatever we have spent, we have not spent basically efficiently. So these have been the two issues that we have faced. So if you want the economy to grow, there are certain inputs that are required for the economy to grow. And that basically is a productive workforce, which means a healthy workforce, educated workforce, skilled workforce, population planning, science and technology, investment in agriculture, industry, infrastructure, political stability, law and order, and a dominant private sector. These are the key ingredients. If they are right, your economy is going to grow. And we have been lagging in most of them, and therefore our economy has not grown as much as, for example, what we call the Asian tigers, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, or even if you compare it with India and Bangladesh. Next, if you look at the governance indicators, which is a World Bank basically report, if you just look at two of them, political stability and absence of violence, Pakistan is 12th out of 149 countries, and the countries below us are Yemen, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Mali, Ethiopia, Sudan, Myanmar, Nigeria, and Syria. So these are the only countries in the world which are below in terms of political stability and absence of violence. One other number, control of corruption. We are 43 out of 149 countries, but surprisingly, Bangladesh is worse than us. It is 33 from the bottom. So Bangladesh actually is rated more corrupt than Pakistan, but still it has done a lot better. It shows that corruption is obviously important to control, but other factors which I just mentioned in terms of education, healthcare, etc., are equally important. If you look at education spending, we have spent about 1.9% of GDP on average over the last 22 years. Bangladesh has spent slightly better, 2.1%, and India has spent 2.9% of GDP on education. So although Bangladesh has spent about the same money on education as us, if you look at their secondary school enrollment is 75%, ours is 45%. So they've used that money better. India has spent about 3% of GDP on education. So over the last 22 years, if Pakistan had also invested about 3% of GDP on education like India and many other countries, we would have spent an extra $44 billion on education. And it would have obviously brought a huge change in the overall education and skill level of the country. Similarly, if you look at healthcare, Pakistan has spent only 0.7% of GDP on education over the last 22 years. Bangladesh has spent about 4 times that much, 2.5% of GDP. India has spent twice versus Pakistan on healthcare. So as a percentage of economy over the last 22 years, Pakistan has spent $25 billion less on healthcare versus India, and $78 billion less versus Bangladesh, if you just look at the percentage of economy. Next is science and technology. The government only spent 0.03% of the budget, of the GDP on science and technology. If you look at Bangladesh, they spend 0.25, which means they spent 8 times as much on science and technology as we do. If you look at India, they spend 0.16% of the GDP, which is about 5 times more than what we do. So the percentage of the economy over the last 13 years, Pakistan has spent $4.3 billion less on science and technology versus India, and $9.5 billion less than Bangladesh. Agriculture spending, again, very critical. And if you look at here, Pakistan has spent only 0.14% of GDP on agriculture per year over the last 22 years. Bangladesh has spent 1%. So it has spent about 7 times more on agriculture than us. India has spent 1.5% of GDP every year. So it has spent 10 times more on agriculture than us. And that's why you see the productivity difference. If you just cross the border in Punjab, the agriculture productivity goes, doubles or triples. So the outcome of that, you can see just, in one indicator, cotton production, where we and Bangladesh and India were about the same in 2000, but today we are down from about 10 million to 7 million, and India is up from 10 million to 35 million, million bales, obviously. So again, the fact that we have not spent on human and physical infrastructure, not spent enough on agriculture infrastructure, our economy has not grown, and that has put us into trouble. If you look at industrial contribution, again, you see that we have spent average industry is 19% of GDP in Pakistan. In Bangladesh, is 27% of GDP. In India, is 28% of GDP. So especially if you look at Bangladesh, in 2000, industry was 22% of their GDP. Today, it is 33% of GDP. Our GDP was 18% in 2000. It's 19% today. So it has not grown that much. And again, the reason industry has not grown, I think too many taxes, the law and order situation. We have kept our currency overvalued most of the time, which has encouraged imports. So we know all, the typical reasons, too much taxes. If you look at exports as a percentage of GDP, Pakistan's exports has averaged about 12% of GDP, Bangladesh 15, and India 20. So if you look at this ratio, exports as a percentage of GDP, countries that are below us in the world are Kenya, Nigeria, Cuba, Gambia, Haiti, Ethiopia, Nepal, Yemen, Burundi, Afghanistan, and Sudan. So these are the only countries in the world where the export to GDP ratio is less than what it is in Pakistan. So these have been very critical factors. Population growth. Our population has grown at 2.7% per year. If you look at India and Bangladesh, the population has grown by 1.8% per year over the last 50 years. So if our population had also grown by the same rate as India and Bangladesh, our population would be 15 crore rather than 23 crore. So 8 crore less people to educate, to feed, to give jobs. So I think this has also been a key factor. And if our population had been 15 crore, our per capita income would be 58% higher, just by the fact that we would have a lower population. So this is something that unfortunately we have seen a lot of Muslim countries focusing on population growth, Indonesia, Malaysia, Bangladesh. Unfortunately, we have not. If you look at military spending, we have spent 3.7% of GDP on military on average over the last 22 years. Bangladesh has spent 1.2% of GDP. So it has spent about 1/3 on military versus us. And India has spent 2.6% of GDP on military. Again, it has spent 50% less than what we have spent on the military. So as a percentage of economy over the last 22 years, Pakistan has spent $37 billion more on military versus India, and $97 billion more on military versus Bangladesh. And again, this is one number where we come out good. We are 11 out of 149 countries in terms of military spending. Again, if you see in 2000, we were spending $3 billion on military and India was spending $14 billion. Today we are spending 11 billion, India is spending 77 billion. So the difference has actually increased. At that time in 2000, India was spending about 5 times more on military than us, and today it is spending about 7 times more than us. And the reason for that is not that they actually have actually allocated more of their budget to the military. The reason for that is that their economy has grown faster than us. So the right way to grow the military is to grow your economy. The wrong way to grow the military is to allocate a higher percentage of the budget or higher percentage of the GDP to the military. Cost of bureaucracy, the state-owned enterprises, just the debt of state-owned enterprises is now in excess of $7 billion. And the government provides 1.3 trillion rupees per year in subsidies and grants to state-owned enterprises. And that's like $4.6 billion per year, which the government is providing as subsidy to state-owned enterprises. And then we go to IMF begging for $1 billion. Again, one more interesting fact, we have a tendency in Pakistan to allocate land to government officials. And a couple of years ago, the Islamabad High Court took notice of that. Government officials and judges were given land in various sectors of Islamabad. And the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court basically inquired from CDA what is the market value of this land that has been given to these government officials. And CDA came back saying it's 1 trillion rupees, which is like $3.6 billion. So just in 1 year, the land that was allocated to government officials was worth $3.6 billion. Okay, and this we are only talking about the federal government. We are not even talking about the provincial government here. One more worry that we have, that the actuarial deficit. Pakistan, government employees' pensions are not funded. And if you look at that liability, that is close to 25 trillion rupees, which is about $91 billion. So most countries basically fund government officials, just like in corporates, the corporates fund, 10% of my salary gets deducted, 10% company puts in, 20% goes to my pension, and after that, the company has no responsibility. In case of Pakistan government, they do not fund the pension liabilities, and this number is somewhere around $91 billion, which is 28% of our GDP. So all these factors, they've actually put us in a very difficult situation. If you look at total government revenue as a percentage of economy, in Pakistan, it has averaged 14%, in Bangladesh 10%, in India 19%. So Bangladesh has spent less, has actually collected less in tax as a percentage of GDP versus Pakistan, but still they are doing better because they have allocated those resources in a better way. So federal government tax collection for all three countries is about 10%, but in India, the provinces do a much better job of collecting taxes, whereas in Pakistan, provinces collect very little in taxes. So the result of all this, that I've covered basically is that if you look at India and Bangladesh, their per capita income is today about 50% higher than us. So an average Indian or an average Bangladeshi earns 50% more than what we earn, and I think the reason for that I've covered in the previous slides. One more factor in terms of debt to GDP ratio, from 63%, our debt has now grown to about 90% of GDP. And if you look at debt servicing, it's eating away about 52% of tax revenues, this number. And this again is because as the debt servicing is going up, we are reducing our development spending. So if you look at just one number, development spending as a percentage of the budget, Pakistani government spends 23%, Bangladesh 63%, and India 38%. So if the government will not spend enough on development, obviously then government development spending has a multiplier impact on the private sector as well. So if the government continues to reduce its development spending, I think it will further slow down our economy. So I'll take another 7 minutes to talk about the way forward now. So first of all, I think some of the strategic thinking that needs to go to our rulers is, first of all, we need to avoid default at all costs. So whatever IMF conditions, no matter how tough they are, we need to avoid it, because once you go into default, things get really bad. I've studied countries that have defaulted, high inflation, high interest rates, massive currency devaluation, increase in poverty, increase in unemployment, increase in lawlessness. So that's not where we want to go. So although IMF conditions are tough, I think we should go with them, and we should remain within the IMF program. The second thing is we need a mindset change where we need to move from geopolitics to geoeconomics. For too long, I think we have survived on geopolitics, but I think the times have changed. We need to focus on the economy. The third thing is, definition of national security. I think for too long, we have basically defined national security as military security. And I think we need to change our mindset where national security is a lot more than military security. It includes food security, human security, economic security, energy security, water security, climate security, and a common man security. So we need to look at all of these issues in a holistic manner and allocate our resources accordingly. We need to reduce our current account deficit, and the best way of doing it is to move to a market-driven exchange rate, which basically promotes exports, discourages imports, and improves reserves. So for too long, we have kept our currency overvalued. If you look at China or what we call the Asian tigers like Malaysia, Indonesia, they have always kept their currency undervalued. We have always mostly kept our currency overvalued, and that has basically brought in too much of imports in Pakistan and has discouraged exports and has eaten away our reserves. Second, we need to reduce the fiscal deficit. And first of all, we need to tax all sources of income, whether it is agriculture, whether it is real estate, whether it is services, and at the same rate. And important is that we do not further burden the corporate sector, because what we have been seeing in the last few years, that as the government has got into a difficult situation, the taxes are increasing on the corporate sector. And corporate sector basically creates jobs, it creates exports, and it pays a lot of taxes. But if you're going to tax corporate sector too heavily, it will just slow down, and ultimately government tax revenues are also going to slow down. So although overall we want to broaden the tax base, we need to be careful not to tax corporates further than they're already being taxed, and the same thing goes for a common man. I think already a common man is facing a lot of burden. And it's important that the government reduces its entire budget, whether it's the federal government or the provincial government or government departments. The entire budget has to be slashed by 30% straight away. That's the only way. We cannot continue to tax. There are limitations to that. We need to cut our expenditure. Our expenditure is way ahead versus if you compare it with Bangladesh. Next important thing is that we need to privatize state-owned enterprises. We have already talked that they're costing the government $4.6 billion in subsidies and grants every year, and we need to use this money to pay off the debt. The government needs to learn within its means. Excessive government borrowing has crowded out the private sector. They cannot borrow, and so the more productive sector, which is the private sector, has been crowded out because of excessive government borrowing from the banks. Government should auction state land owned by it and its departments and use those proceeds to reduce the debt. And no state land should be allocated to government officials, politicians, judges, or government departments. State land should only be auctioned and the money used to reduce the government debt. We need to, this was a British legacy to give state land to officials. I think we need to get away with this. Important in terms of governance, I think we need to go to a public-private or partnership. I'll sort of skip some of this in the interest of time. Important thing is, I think, to basically delegate financial and administrative powers to the local government. I think this was done in India and Bangladesh about 50 years ago, and we are way behind. We need to delegate to the local level because governance is best closer to home. I think I'll and skip some of these points, but I think we already have a Pakistan National Security Committee. Its mandate has to be enhanced, where I think now that we say national security is a lot more than military security, all those matters need to be discussed at the National Security Committee level. And then I think finally we need to have a conducive business environment, public-private partnerships, speedy utilization of natural resources, speedy completion of special economic zones. And then I've already talked about human security. We need to increase our spending on education, healthcare, wherever there are human interests. And finally, I think in difficult times, we need to increase our social net for the poor. I think it's very important the way inflation is growing, that the government focuses on providing food stamps to the poor, where they can go and buy at least their basic food necessities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Now, may I request Mr. Javed Jabbar, who has joined us just now, to please come forward and address the audience. Mr. Javed Jabbar is the former Minister of Information and Senator. Please give a big round of applause for Mr. Javed Jabbar.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Talib, Karim, President of MAP, distinguished fellow speakers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am jumping the queue. It's very impolite, accustomed as I am to being discourteous, but only because an unavoidable disruption of a schedule made me come late and leave early. But it's a privilege to be here with all of you. I can see a very exceptional assembly of people, bright and early at 9 a.m., mashallah. I had calculated that if it said 9, these highly important gentlemen and ladies won't come before 9:30. How mistaken I was. How flawed is human judgment. And one is mistakenly sometimes called a leader, though one doesn't deserve to be. But when I looked at the theme of this convention, it was very provocative. Timeless leadership. Is there such a thing as timeless leadership? It's an oxymoron. Leadership, how can it be timeless? Values are timeless. Principles of leadership are timeless. But leadership itself is fortunately, refreshingly mortal. The graveyards are full of indispensable people and indispensable leaders. Leaders come and go. But the concept of leadership, yes, that should be timeless in theory. But in practice, timelessness implies a kind of staticness, a fixedness, that should not change. And yet, the study of the history of leadership shows that leadership itself needs to change, needs to adjust to new conditions, objective conditions that may change, that may require diametrically opposite actions, which are sometimes perhaps rightly dismissed as making U-turns. But what happens if objective conditions change and you have taken decisions earlier according to different objective conditions? Should one relentlessly stick to that position because I want to be consistent? So, leadership requires flexibility. And we are in the month of March, a few days away from the anniversary of the adoption of the Lahore Resolution, which later became called the Pakistan Resolution, even though the word Pakistan does not occur in the text of the resolution. But studying how that text got drafted, day to day, minute to minute, changes right up to the last moment, and Mr. Jinnah's remarkable capacity to be flexible, to accommodate the leader of the Unionist Party in the Punjab, which actually was opposing the text of the resolution. They actually managed to make conditions difficult for the Muslim League. even though they were part of the Muslim League. But Mr. Jinnah did not lose his cool. He wanted to ensure unanimity. So he deliberately adjusted positions, phrases, and yet Sikandar Hayat, who led Punjab at that time, was not happy. So flexibility, and yet immutability, changelessness. And where does that come from? There are individuals here far better equipped. And we've just had an example, Dr. Amjad's very fine presentation, the tail end of which I caught, who are going to enlighten you with how timeless leadership should apply to institutions in the public sector, in the private sector. I will have only one submission to make and just take another 3 or 4 minutes. When I look at the timelessness of leadership, I draw strength not from people who lead large institutions or even smaller institutions. I draw strength from the memory and the experience and the knowledge of what parents do as leaders, how they imbue the most important values in a human being at the formative stage. And it doesn't matter that they do not lead multitudes. They are not leaders of millions. They are leaders of 1 or 2 or 3 children. But the impact that they make on one child, a mother especially, can have a lasting, lifelong impact. And that one child, well motivated, well imbued with the right values, can then go on to serve as a multiplier who in turn has an effect on millions. So parents, father and mother, and I'm so privileged to have had 2, who didn't get along with each other, who divorced a few years after I was born. And I have no bitterness about that divorce, but each of them gave me whatever few merits that I think I have, which my wife, of course, strongly doubts whether I have any merits. But notionally, the gift of writing, the gift of reading, the gift of speaking, whatever one has in the heart or the mind, I treasure that. And when I travel around the country and see in villages, in towns, in slums, how parents can change the direction of a family, of a community. It's a miracle in motion. And there are millions of them in Pakistan. Anonymous, they'll never appear on television, and they won't be reported in the print. They won't even might not be using social media, but they are truly timeless. And what do they represent? They represent the values of integrity, of respect for each other, respect for elders, compassion, which is what makes the Pakistani nation amongst the most compassionate people on earth. We may be making a mess of our official economy, but we can drive strength from the fact that that timeless value of empathy for the other person is deeply ingrained in us. And I think that from values like that is where we will derive the strength to overcome the current morass that we are trapped in. We will recover because we have it within us, the heritage of belief in our parents, heritage of a great religion, and not only Islam, other religions that have flourished in Pakistan, and that we need to respect: Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, all of them. And I wish you well, insight and enlightenment as the day proceeds. And I do regret not being able to benefit by listening to you for the rest of the sessions. But thank you very much for your very valued attention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening speech. Now, may I request Mr. Alexander Van Riet to give his presentation. Mr. Alexander Van Riet is partner at Lenoble Management Consulting. He has more than 25 years of experience as CEO and board member executive in B2B and FMCG markets. He has operated globally and worked in strategic consulting. He is also the author of the book In Pursuit of Chocolate, A Journey of Discovery. Now, please give a big round of applause for Mr. Alexander Van Riet. It's a bit mouthful.
Can I have some sound? Ooh. Probably one of the first speakers that runs off the stage as soon as he's got introduced. Little clicker thing. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having made this possible. I will start my little presentation that I have a confession to make. About 30 years ago, I did something, or I thought something that in hindsight I'm not very proud of. Something that it was naive, and something that was slightly embarrassing. I went to do an MBA because I thought it would make me a leader. Now, in hindsight, I realize that that's about the same as buying a book on parenthood and thinking that you'll be a good father or mother. It doesn't work that way. You just mentioned parents and the importance of parents. So one of the things that I'd like to do for the next couple of minutes, if I advance, yeah. I'll start by taking a little risk. Now, is any of you expecting a baby in the next 2 weeks? Okay. Because if you are, what I'm going to say next is not for you. Anybody else, do me a favor, take out your mobile phone for me. Go ahead, take out your mobile phones. You have a mobile phone, I know. Take out your mobile phone. Yeah, I'm going to wait till you do it. Take out your mobile phones. Okay, hold them up in the air. I want to see those mobile phones in the air. Okay, now do me a favor. Put it on the table in front of you and slide it over to the person next to you. Now, if you want it back in the next 20 minutes, you got to pay him 1,000 rupees. Okay? The only thing that I ask you is not to touch your phone for the next half hour. Now, there's two options. Option number one, you'll be entertained by me. Option number two, you have time for yourself without distraction. I settle for either one. I'll settle for either one. Okay? So, let's talk about timeless leadership. What is timeless leadership? And I think that timeless leadership consists of two different parts. There is the timeless part and the leadership part. I first like to just touch on the leadership part, then we'll jump over to timeless, because as you also pointed out, what is the timeless part of it and how can you make that happen? Leadership, I'll put to you, is three major building blocks. Purpose, process, and people. Purpose, people. Let's go through each one of those. Purpose is something where a leader gives a vision. This person has a vision of what he wants to become. He is willing to endure amazing pain and agony in order to get there. Why? He believes in what he can become. When you mentioned about Pakistan and what it can become, it is what people believe. They have to believe in that vision. And sometimes you have to create an alternate reality as a leader. But you got to paint that picture. And once you paint that picture, you have to get people to engage with it and share that vision. Because just like this gentleman, what he's willing to do, if people are willing to put the effort in, it is amazing what people can accomplish. Yeah? It is what Simon Sinek refers to, the why you do it. Why are you here? Why do you do things? If you can tap into that, if you can tap into that, you get things done. Tremendously important. The Americans will refer to the expression, he drank the Kool-Aid. Yeah? That means that you believe so much in it that you drank the Kool-Aid. It became part of you. It became part of your DNA, your values, how you work. It comes from the Jim Jones cult in the United States, where there was a following and people believed so much in what he was doing, they were willing to drink the Kool-Aid, although the Kool-Aid had cyanide in it. Yeah? Now, I'm not proposing that you make your staff or your people, your teams drink cyanide, but the idea is, what is that vision? What is that I have a dream speech? Yeah? If you take a look at Martin Luther King, he didn't say like, it would be really good if. No, he started with, I have a dream. And as a leader, that's the first thing, purpose. You got to give them the dream. You got to have something that people completely believe in. The second part, is the process. So what you're taking a look at, and how as a leader do you take a look at the process? Now the first thing you have to do as a leader is you have to recognize the elephant in the room. That's not always easy. Although it's very big, actually naming the elephant, giving it a flag, so people recognize this is the issue, and we agree on that issue, because if they don't agree on the issue, you're not going to solve it. So first of all, name the elephant in the room. Second part of that is, the question is, how do you eat an elephant? And the old story is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So that's what a leader does. A leader takes that entire massive thing and he deconstructs it. He gets it into bite-sized bits so people can understand what is my part to do in eating this elephant. It's an essential part. So as a leader, one of the things is to recognize it, name it, break it apart so people are not drinking, as they say, from a fire hydrant, right? Ever tried to drink from a fire hydrant? Yeah? At the end of it, you're completely soaking wet and you're still thirsty because you can't drink it because it's just too much in one go. So what do timeless leaders do? Or what do leaders do? They actually, if it's very messy, you bring structure and you make people understand it. But at the same time, when things are very structured and everything is running well, you do the opposite. Because if everything is running well and everything is hunky-dory and you don't change, you're on the right track, the proverbial train is coming down the track and you get run over. And typically that's competition. Now that's difficult as a leader because on the one hand, you're trying to structure and simplify, and on the other hand, as soon as people feel that you've done that, you're going to disrupt it again. But as a leader, you need to do that. You have to actually love the discontinuity. So you structure, and at the same time, there's this dichotomy in there, because you love the discontinuity. And also you have to have a passion for change. You have to like change. If you're a leader and you don't like change, it's going to be tough, because you're going to be fighting yourself all the way. You got to love change. You got to embrace it. Yeah? And you have to find that balance, that creative tension between structure and messiness. So that's the process. It's about the what and the how you do it. The third part is how you manage people. Yeah? So it was purpose, process, and people. And the people element is probably the messiest one. There's the old expression, I wish you a lot of personnel. Now, what do? How do you manage people? The first thing is you collect people. Yeah, you got to collect the right people around you that believe in that vision, and you try to let them share that vision. And you know what? If they don't share that vision, you either change them to share it, or you change the people. And you can have very good people, and they just don't fit. And to understand that, you need to get different people to work together. And if you work in an international organization, yeah, that can be a challenge. My management team was absolutely the most diverse that you can imagine. You take it from a nationality, from a religion, from a culture, from a sex, from an educational background. I had everything in that team. And at one point in time I said, but I'm the conductor. To which one of my members said, no, you're not. You're the zookeeper. You make sure that the zebra isn't eaten by the leopard and the leopard doesn't get bitten by the cobra. And that's one of the things that you have to as a leader. You got to get strange animals in one room together. You got to have them share that purpose, that vision that you go, and make them work together. And you have to organize them. You have to organize them in a way that they can work together. Sometimes a little bit disruption, but you got to make them work together. And that's kind of like a zipper. Each little bit of the zipper can't do anything on its own. But boy, if you have the zipper work together, and that's that middle part that zips up, that's you as a leader. And as you think about that, if you think about your teams, what are you doing right now to make sure that these particular individuals with all their issues with another and style issues and attitude differences, and some works well under stress and the other one doesn't work under stress, how do you make them zip together? Because that's what you do as a leader, right? That's how to make people work together. So that is the leadership part of it, yeah? That is just purpose, process, and people. Fine, we got that easily done. Then there's the timeless leader. Now, if I would ask you, if you would think of a timeless leader, who would that be? Just pick somebody in your head. My bet is that it's probably somebody who fought opposition, who fought competition, yeah, who was relentless and did not give up, yeah, and the element that is probably unique about them, they're not a fighter, but they're a warrior. Now, what's the difference between a fighter and a warrior? A fighter wants to fight this battle, and I want to win from you. A warrior actually has a purpose, and he does it for a greater cause, right? So, now what makes timeless leadership? I put to you that on the one hand, we have the leadership part, the purpose, process, people, but there's another side. And that is typically underestimated. And that is how you do it. It is around a growth mindset. It is about how you think and act. And it's around authenticity. And authenticity is a large part, probably, what your parents have given you. Just to hook into what you said before. Now, let me go through each one of those. A growth mindset. As you know, it was just introduced, I come from Dubai. Dubai has a little bit of growth going for it. And if you take a look at what is there, it is absolutely amazing. The Burj Khalifa, the Burj Al Arab, the palm that was built, right? But that growth mindset comes with something very unique. And that is, it is unreasonable. I worked in a water company, just like what you have here on the table in the UAE. It's an organization that went from 0 in 8 years to become the #1 water brand in the UAE. Now, water is a very strange thing, yeah? Because normally water, the product, is odorless, colorless, and tasteless. How do you sell something that's odorless, colorless, and tasteless, right? But we did. And the demands that were made on me were absolutely absurd sometimes. And I would have friends, they would tell me, but Alexander, how can you do this? That's not reasonable what they ask. And my answer was, well, right. But if in Dubai they were reasonable, do you think they would have had the Burj Khalifa? And a Burj Al Arab? And a palm? No. So one of the things as a leader is you got to have a growth mindset, and you got to have this extreme thing sometimes, of which you might even doubt yourself, but your people can actually do it if you believe in it. There is for those people that are into Pixar and monsters, they will recognize this thing, Mike. And Mike had a dream and he wanted to do something, and everybody told me he couldn't do it, and he just kept on doing it. Yeah? And in the end, he got where he needed to be. Now, that's the kind of attitude that you have to have as a leader. You have to have that growth mindset against all odds. Yeah? And it also works in a smaller world, in your private individuals, how you treat your kids, how you treat your family, how you treat people at work. It is around everyday life decision, having that positive attitude. And I'll tell you at the end my story, my personal story, which took me around the world. But it's around a growth mindset, which needs to be part of your fiber and how you operate in your organization. Let me tell you a second story. When I was younger, I lived in a town and there was a fire. And it was a bad fire. It was such an intense fire that the heat alone, if you've ever been close to a fire, you know how warm it can get. And it was so hot that the fire trucks couldn't get to the heat. Yeah, it was an industrial heat. And the fire truck stayed 1 block away. And then all at once you could hear this fire engine coming from around the turn, and it came around the turn, and this particular fire truck, it passed all the other trucks. And as it got there, it hit the brakes, and the brakes were screaming all the way, and it stopped right in front of the fire, and the guys got out and started putting out the fire. Now what do you think happened? The other firemen are seeing this, and they're going like, we better get out there. So they jumped in their trucks, went out there, and they put out the fire. And a lot of property was saved, and lives were saved. And the mayor of my town was really, was amazed at that. He said, I want to have a celebration for what the firemen did. And they had a parade, and they had on the park, they had hot dogs and barbecues, and it was a celebration and flags and stuff like that. And the mayor got onto stage and says, I want to thank the fire department for the amazing thing that they've done, the lives they've saved, the property they have saved in our town. And I'd like to have the fireman who drove the fire truck, I want him on stage, I want to give him an award. And the guy came on stage, and the mayor said, sirs, thank you very much. Amazing what you've done. Is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can do for you? To which the fireman said, yes, could you please approve the new set of brakes for my truck? Now, what effectively had happened is that his truck didn't break, but he went past it and he started putting out the fire. And what really happened was he didn't know it couldn't be done, so he went out and did it. Let me say that one more time. He didn't know it couldn't be done, and therefore he went out and did it. And that's one of these things that you have to have as a mindset as a leader. Even when you see something that can be done, go ahead and do it anyway, and let people call you nuts. Yeah? But you got to pass that. You got to pass over what other judgments are from other people. So growth mindset, number one, growth mindset. If you don't have a growth mindset, do not even think about becoming a timeless leader, because you have to have that. You got to see the growth, the silver lining, or the gold lining in everything. Second part, how do you think and how do you act? So, because great leaders think and act differently. First of all, they are obsessive learners. Yeah? If you describe yourself as an obsessive learner or an obsessive observer, you're probably on the way. Because that's what you need to do. You need to continuously learn, have this hunger, figure out what goes on. Why is this happening? Yeah? And they consistently ask, my favorite question that my teams always made fun of me is, what is the next best alternative? If you ask yourself, what's the next best alternative, you at least open up your mind to something else is possible. Now, if that something else is not as good as what you had in mind, then of course you do the first thing. Yeah? What else can I do? Arie de Geus is a guy who was working for Shell in the 1980s, 1990s, wrote a book, The Living Company, which is really around scenario playing. And he taught Shell about scenario playing. And what he said is, I'm not worried about the scenario itself that we play out, but I want managers, I want leaders to go through the experience of how do you scenario play. Because a variant of that might happen, and that way you have trained your muscle memory, on how to solve problems. And you make roadmaps. And what it also does, it allows you as a business leader not to look in the business, but at the business. Yeah, you don't want to look in the business, at the business. So take the view of the bigger picture. Two pictures here. The first one is a dock. It's actually at Fort Myers. And that particular dock is the dock at the house of Thomas Edison. Now, Thomas Edison, we know, a very prolific inventor. He's got most of the patents on his name. I think he's got over 1,000 patents or in the US alone, and over 2,500 patents worldwide. Absolutely crazy. I think in his most prolific year, he did more than 1 patent a day. Absolutely amazing. Now, why his dock there? One of the things that he needed to do, he needed to think. He wanted to be quiet, and he needed to think. Now, he was already helped by the fact that he could sometimes focus without being disturbed, because what people don't know, he was actually profoundly deaf, which helped, because that meant that he said, I don't hear the noise around me. The second thing is that he knew that if he went fishing, if he went to sit on the dock, People said, don't disturb Thomas, he's fishing. So he would go and sit fish and do his thinking there. He had only one problem. When you were fishing, you got these annoying fish. So actually he had a rod, a line, a bob, and a weight. But he didn't go with bait because he didn't want to be disturbed by the fish. But that was his quiet time. Now I ask you as business leader, maybe not fishing, but when is the last time you built in quiet time? I dare you to do it, to sit down on a chair, take your favorite chair, and just think about the business. Don't write anything down, just think about the business, but think about it deeply. It's most of the most difficult things to do. Yeah? So that's about thinking. There's also the acting. How do you act differently? The other gentleman that you see here is Werner von Braun. He is actually, was at NASA. He is the father of space travel, let's say. And he was famously heard quoting one time, it takes 65,000 errors before you qualify to make a rocket to go to the moon. Now, think about that. If you're a leader, if you want to get things done, if I tell you before you start, you're going to fail 65,000 times, and then still say, I'm still going to do it. To make that parallel again towards, because Edison on here, the parallel to Edison, right? Edison who found the iridescent light, the light bulb. And somebody said at one point in time, like, well, you're not making much progress. To which he said, well, actually, that's not true. I've already learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. That's that mindset you got to have. That's that mindset, and then how you think differently. So on the timeless side, we have a growth mindset, you have thinking and acting, and then there's authenticity. And authenticity is one of the most important parts as a leader that you have to show. And authenticity is that you have to be worthy of belief and trust. And on that one, you cannot fake authenticity. It's just impossible. People will know. It's like the book Blink if you haven't read it, but it talks about, people know instantly if it's true or not. Now, it is human nature to judge. Everybody does it. You see somebody and you judge them. You can't help it. I mean, that's what we do. It's probably one of the great things that we do, except for outside of looking forward in time, that we can do as humans. The other thing we can judge. Now, the interesting part about judging is that there's a very big difference in how things get judged. We judge ourselves by our intentions, but we'll judge others by their actions. So I will judge you by what you do on a daily basis, right? Although you will judge yourself, whatever action you did, with your intent. And they might not be the same, or might not look the same. As you become a leader, as you grow up in an organization, people are always watching you. Every action you take, every coffee boy you talk to, every operator you encounter with, every senior manager that you're in, how you check into a hotel, everything you do, trust me, somebody's observing you and judging that action. So you can't be very structured on the one hand and then be unstructured on the other one. You have to be coherent. You have to have an authenticity to you. That is how you operate. Now, you might be a messy operator, or you might be a very structured operator. That's fine. If you're a messy operator, don't try to pretend to be a structured one, please. Because people go like, right? If you're very structured, don't try to create messiness just because you think it doesn't work. You have to be authentic to your style, to what you do, because people recognize it. Sometimes I hear people say, do as I say, not as I do. Excuse my French here, but that's bullshit. I don't buy that. You gotta walk the talk. Because if you don't walk the talk, how do you expect other people to do what they are saying? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. So you have to be very genuine. And in the book Fish, they talk about when you're somewhere, be there. Put your telephone away. Don't think about it. It's one of the hardest things to do, to listen, right? But be there with somebody. Really be there. Listen to what they're saying. And what's more important, listen to what they're not saying, but what you're seeing. Because that's what leaders do. That's what timeless leaders do. They're authentic, and they also have a way of working. I always have to laugh. I had a senior manager of a very large organization that I talked to the other day, a multi-billion-dollar company, and he says, CEO, my door is always open. You know what I told him? Well, do me a favor, walk out then. Don't expect the customer service representative to walk into your CEO office. Don't expect a line operator to walk in that office. Yeah? Take the Six Sigma Gemba approach. If that door's always open, why don't you walk out and go take a look what happens and listen to people and ask them and be authentic, be really interested. It is amazing what you're going to learn, because what is being told from the bottom into the organization, to the supervisor, the manager, the whatever the division head to you, by the time it gets to you, it's like Chinese whispers, as they say. What you hear is not what's happening. One walk in the plant, one walk in your customer service. I would love for hotel operators to actually try to check in themselves or pay their bills. Yeah? Go on the floor, do it. If you're an engineer in the company, yeah, get your hands dirty. But even if you're not an engineer, go in and take a look what really happens. Go sit next to that customer service rep and listen into the conversation. It's amazing what you learn. It's amazing what you learn. So get your hands dirty, be authentic, be out there, talk to people. So there's two parts to it. Yeah, again, timeless leadership. The first part is the leadership. It's purpose, process, and people. The second part, timeless, growth mindset, thinking, acting, and authenticity. Now, I will put to you that the first part, that's what is being taught in schools. Now, first of all, in Pakistan, obviously, I've learned people need to stay in school more and longer. That will add a lot of value. But we're talking about purpose, and people in MBAs, they learn about visioning and about process and deconstructing processes and about organizational designs. Yeah? But where do people learn about how do you get a growth mindset in? How do you inspire the people in your organization to have a growth mindset? Yeah? Rinson Branson once said, whenever somebody comes into my office, yeah, and they come with a new suggestion, I always say yes. Now, can you always do that? Maybe not. But I put to you that 99% of the cases you can say yes. You can say yes. Now, tell me more about it. And you might use a version of it, or you say, it's a great idea, maybe not this week, but in 2 weeks from now. Yeah? But say yes to that. That growth mindset is so incredibly important. But that leadership part, the growth mindset, the thinking and acting, where is that in our educational systems? Where is that in your organization? Where do you teach people how to think and act differently and out of the box? As a timeless leader, that's your role. Because that will open up the organization, and that's authenticity. And actually, at this point in time, because that is undervalued, also with Fahad Kamali, who was mentioned earlier, we're looking at a leadership masterclass, and that these things are going to be in there. It's being developed right now, because you got to have that mindset. Yeah. Now, let me go back to one of the things that I mentioned earlier on about a personal story. About 7 years ago, I was running a large organization, a company with 22 factories worldwide. I was traveling the world. I was flying more than a Lufthansa pilot, basically. But that was not my job. My job was actually working in the rest of the time. And I had an absolutely phenomenal week. I had in Vienna, Monday morning, I had a board meeting. On Tuesday, early in the morning, I jumped on a plane and flew to Kuala Lumpur. We had a dinner with the team in Kuala Lumpur. We had the next morning, on Wednesday morning, we had a meeting with a client, signed a contract. Wednesday afternoon, I jumped on a plane and I flew to China. In China, we opened up a new factory, absolutely brand new factory, beautiful new machines, fireworks, the whole thing. Thursday night, I flew back. Thursday night, I landed, and in the flight in Vienna lands the first thing in the morning. I arrived Friday morning, and I go home, I take a shower, take my kids to school, and go to the office. And I got about 2 hours to prepare for the meeting with the CEO about the CapEx for next year. I'll make a long story short. I went into that meeting very well prepared. It was a bit odd, because the HR manager was sitting there as well. Now, one of the things that I had done before, about 2 months before, we had done a big merger and acquisition. Short story, hour and a half later, I was fired. thank you very much, leave your keys at the front door. Now, don't feel sorry for me. The conditions were very agreeable. So financially, not an issue. So I got home, and I said, hon, got an issue. So what do we do now? Because one of the things that did come with that contract, I had to stop working, but one of the things that I could not do is I could not work in the industry, I could not work one step up or one step down in the same value chain for 2 years. It was compensated very well, so I was pretty happy. But at this point in time, you should have seen my wife. She had this fear in her eyes. What is this guy going to do sitting on the couch at home? Can you imagine me sitting on your couch every day, 24 hours a day? Not a good thing. So sat down and I said, why don't we travel the world? Why don't we just take the kids out of school, backpacks, travel the world for a year? We'll see what happens. If looks could have killed, I would have been a dead man right there. So the next morning, I wake up, walk downstairs, walk into the living room. My wife is sitting at the dinner table with her computer. And she looks up and she says, it's better if we travel west than east. I said, what? She says, it's better if we travel west than east. So what are you on about? She says, I think we should make that travel around the world. Well, actually, for 4 weeks, we tried to say that we were not going to do it. But in the end, we went to do it. And my wife had one of her wonderful little sayings. She says, if the world gives you lemons, make lemon juice. And take lemon juice and make it into lemonade. And that's what we did. So on that stuff, I'd like to end with a very short couple of pictures. And I apologize, there's some family pictures in there. But if you take a look at this, one of the things that about a growth mindset, when you have a setback, it's actually a golden opportunity to do something different. I was so passionate about it that afterwards, actually, I wrote a book, which is that book In Pursuit of Chocolate. By the way, it has nothing to do with chocolate, but and it's downloadable on Kindle. And this, what I've done is I've just taken a couple of the pictures. It's only about like 2 minutes or so, and it's a selection of about 16,000 pictures that we took, because we were on the road for almost a full school year. And as you look at these pictures, when you think about leadership, the reason why I picked these 2 pictures is each one of these things was either designed or created or made, and I bet you it was done by somebody who had a vision. That first guy that was doing the plank, it was probably done by somebody who had a vision, who wanted to create something amazing, and was able to get other people to follow suit, and make that happen. So on that happy note, I want to thank you very much. I will actually play this video clip to round up, and as you look at it, again, just think about what that person who created that, what he must have thought. And right after that, you can grab your phones again, and you don't have to pay your neighbor. Let's see if this works. Thank you very much.
Mr. Andrew is also partner at Gateway Partners, chair of Cable and Wireless Seychelles Limited, and a non-executive director of Seychelles International Mercantile Banking Corporation. Now, may I request Mr. Andrew to please come on stage and address the audience.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's quite hard to come in halfway through one speaker, pick up what they're talking about, and then hear another one. But there are a couple of things that resonated. When Alexander said, get out of your office and talk to people, I love talking to people whilst I'm traveling. And on my way here, I asked a man in Doha Airport, where I had the great privilege of spending most of yesterday, what he thought the problems in Pakistan were. And he said it was all about politicians. So when I arrived here early this morning, I asked the driver who took me to the hotel what the economy was like and what was going on. And he said it was all about Ukraine. He said it was all about oil. And I think the problem is it's so easy to simplify this. And I'm not here to make political statements or economic statements. And Pakistan's problems are not all of its own making. Many of them are historical. When you look at the tragedy of last year's floods, you are suffering, as Samina says, the unintended consequences of other people's actions. Just as we now worry, as I do with my children, about the unintended consequences of social media. The people who created the Industrial Revolution did not envisage what you're now going through. So, we have to think about how we challenge that. And Samina stole a bit of my thunder by saying that you are one of the top 3 destinations in the world for IT projects. Not because I was going to say that, but because I was going to say one of the things that Pakistan needs to rely upon is the intelligence and ingenuity of its people. Because only that way will you address some of the challenges posed by climate change. Only by maintaining the robust institutions that you have, that those of us who do not live here but visit frequently see written about every day. Like Alexandra, I live in Dubai, so I get to read the papers about Pakistan every day. Only by maintaining those institutions will it give you the societal strength to move forwards. But the change will come from the people in this room. It will come from the leaders of industry. It won't come from people like me doing pro-poor infrastructure. I can assure you, in my meager experience in countries around the world, it is very rare that the change comes from politicians. The change comes from business leaders saying, we've got to find a better way to do it. And also, there is a profitable, better way to do it. And there is. So, as we think about what Pakistan needs to do, and I think your challenge is slightly different to many other countries, because as you read about the debates going on around the world, you will read a lot about just and equitable transitions in terms of climate change. You will read about rich countries promising $8.5 billion to South Africa for a just and equitable transition. You will read about another $7 billion for Indonesia, and similarly large amounts for Vietnam. And you will think, why is no one giving us that sort of money for the transition? Because your challenge is not transition of climate, it is not mitigation of your existing emissions. Your challenge, as brought home by the floods last year, is about adaptation and resilience. It is not about transitioning away from a super dirty, emissive culture and economy, but about building an economy that creates jobs, that facilitates, as Samina talks about, some of the IT skills which are distributed. It's not about a lifestyle like Alexander's and mine, where you get on a plane all the time, because you don't need to in the same way you used to. But it is about adaptation and resilience. Adaptation and resilience are critical. So as you think about your businesses, as you think about your capital expenditure, you think about what you're building now that will work in 5 and 10 years' time. Think about how you make those projects more resilient. Now, if you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago to think about adaptation and resilience, I'd have said, yeah, that's all very well, that sounds great. Which business school are you from, and how do I bring that to life in my real world? But I was talking to someone from a university in the UK last week, which has the highest ratio of climate change scientists of anywhere in the world outside Beijing. And he said, we have 2 problems, Andy. The first of them is we have 3 times as much private sector work as we can handle. And the second is we all worry that we're not doing enough good. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, we've got lots of asset management firms that come to us. And as Samina says, the game in town these days is ESG. And what they want is they want us to tell them that they're doing the right things, so that they can put on their marketing materials they're ESG compliant. And I went, well, it's not a bad way to make a living. It's not great, but it's not a bad way to make a living. He said, yeah, but we've got so much data, and we've got so many predictive capabilities now that we believe we can tell you within 20, 30, and 40 years from now, for an area 60 kilometers by 60 kilometers, what the peak temperature and peak humidity will be during the year. And no one's interested in that, Andy. I said, but that means if I've got a project about actually providing electricity, I can look at the topology of the ground, and that will help me put it in the right place. But you can help me put it in a place that is likely to be much more resilient. And he went, exactly. We can forecast in a way we couldn't. And that, I think, is one of the areas where data, as Samina talks about, capability, as evidenced by the people of Pakistan, and climate come together. So, for all of you in this room, as you're thinking about the future, don't think about it in abstracts. Think about how much more valuable your business will be if you are demonstrably better than your competitors in building resilience for the future. This isn't just about making it better for the people of the country. This isn't just about reducing the impact of disasters. You can have a competitive advantage by doing this well. So let me finish with a couple of shameless plugs. Part of the PIDG group, which you heard a bit about, is InfraZamin, headed here in Pakistan by Mihan Rahman, who's at the front here, known to many of you. PIDG does pro-port infrastructure around the world, and we've been doing it for 20 years. We've provided new or improved infrastructure to 220 million people so far. And that's, if you come from a private sector background, as I do, that's great. If you look at the scale of the challenge, it's a start, but only a start. So InfraZamin will do local currency guarantees. It will work with companies such as yourselves to help you to raise finance, to make that financing more attractive. And in the case of power, where finance is normally in hard currency, to enable you to finance some of that in local currency, making it more attractive and more affordable to the poorest in society over time. Because as currencies face challenge and devalue, the people most shut off from infrastructure are often the poorest. And it was interesting, again, preparing to come here and thinking back to my first time in Pakistan, which rather ages me, when the exchange rate was 92 to the dollar. So think about the business imperative, think about the way in which you can gain competitive advantage, and please talk to me and talk to myself, because we won't do things for you. We're not an international organization coming into Pakistan saying we have answers. What we are here for is to work with the private sector, work with leaders such as yourselves, and say, we can help you to achieve what you want to achieve. So there's a real business imperative to this, as well as a societal one we all read about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I request Mr. Amir Jamil Abbasi to please come on stage and present mementos to our distinguished speakers along with Mr. Talib Karim. I request Dr. Amjad Waheed to come forward and accept the memento. ठीक है. Mr. Alexander Van Reed, you are requested to please come forward and accept the memento. Ms. Samina Rizwan, you are requested to please come forward and accept the memento. Mr. Andrew Bainbridge, please come forward and accept the memento. Is Mr. Javed Jabbar still here? Okay. Now we will be having a tea break, short tea break. Please be back at 11:30 so we can start the next session.